Before we start this session, this is the last session of the meeting, so you need to come forward. You need to join us for the session. Please, come on. Come on, I see you. I see you waving for me. Come on. Come on. This is going to be the fun session. Look at us. You got the best moderators. Woo, woo, yeah. Oh, that's so cute, Tammy. Woo, woo, she says. Come on, Mark. Come on, Donnie. Come over here. You got to join us over here. I'm going to keep talking until you move over here.
Okay, so my ARS isn't right.
Go ahead.
Whatever. Sorry. My ARS.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last session of the meeting. We've got some amazing speakers lined up. We are all informal, and I've been decorated, and I've been given this shot glass that smells like tequila from last night. Thanks for being here. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Marc Priest. Marc is the Area Vice President for the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast regions for the Spectrum Medical. He has worked at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia and Nemis Children's Hospital in multiple clinical and administrative roles prior to joining Spectrum in 2019. Welcome, Marc.
Thanks, AMSET, for having me, and special thanks for everybody that's hung around for the last session with true diehards here to the end. So disclosures, I'm not a perfusionist. It was, very hard, aside from the few up here, to get some perfusionists to agree to do a talk at 11:15 on Sunday at the last day of the conference. They had to widen the net a little bit. No, I joke. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I do work for Spectrum Medical. Special thanks to perfusionists that have had a significant impact on my life. A couple of chiefs that I've had the pleasure to work under throughout my career. Tammy Rosenthal at CHOP, Paul Cairns for recruiting me down to Nemours, and Dan Duncan down there, and Christian Pizarro is a cardiac surgeon who I learned a tremendous amount from, so I appreciate them. We're going to talk about gaseous microemboli today. And I apologize, I'm a little off my game. I really beg to have my computer up here because I like to use the cursor and do all these things, but I had to oblige by the rules. So bear with me as we move through the slides. The pointer won't work either, because if I point the pointer there, you're not going to see it up there, and it doesn't really reach over there. So I'll do the best I can with the slides. But thinking about GME, we're going to talk about gaseous microemboli, the short and long-term effects of GME. We'll discuss gas laws briefly. Past techniques to remove GME, some of the limitations of those designs, and we'll talk a little bit about VQ mismatch and how our solution can, contribute to mitigating GME. So gaseous microemboli, common occurrence in both cardiopulmonary bypass and ECMO. Common ways that it can, get into the patient. You can get into the circuit first, then get into the patient, but entrainment from the venous cannula, surgical field, as the heart's open to air, medication and infusion lines. You'd be surprised if you really looked about how much air we pump into our patients, either accidentally or on purpose, and then also cavitation from the venous lines. Why is it harmful? It's comprised mostly of nitrogen, and nitrogen's an immiscible gas, so it's neither absorbed or produced by the tissues. And as it travels through the body, it can get trapped in the microvascular system, basically causing an ischemic event. And so if it were comprised of only oxygen, then it would just absorb back into the bloodstream. But because it's mostly nitrogen and there's nitrogen gradient in the blood, which we'll talk about, it stays in kind of its gaseous form and contributes to ischemic events. And so large GME can cause devastating, often fatal strokes in patients, and it's easy to diagnose. But what's much harder to diagnose are kind of the more subtle effects that happen after cardiac surgeries: short-term memory loss, long-term memory loss, neurocognitive decline, personality changes, and they can be difficult to diagnose and quantify, and often have to be followed long-term over the course of time. And this all comes back to just the GME kind of blocking the blood flow to the vital organs and the tissues. Obviously, there's Pumphead, which is a documentary. That was a video that was published to kind of reviews this information. In a landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2001, researchers at Duke University tested 261 patients before and after bypass surgery. 53% had significant cognitive decline when they were discharged, and 42% still suffered from it 5 years later. And talking about some HIT studies using high intensity transcranial signals, a Doppler device that can kind of detect air in solution. Pugsley and his group looked at this, and what they found was there was a linear correlation when you look at the number of hits that occurred during cardiopulmonary bypass, combined with the degree that those that led to deficit. So, if the hit counts were under 200, maybe 8.6% of those had a deficit, whereas once you got over 1,000, it was as high as 43% with a linear correlation. Groom and his group looked at S100B levels. S100B is a serum marker of neurologic injury, and there's also a linear correlation. With the larger number of GME, higher the levels of S100B, the higher the risk of neurologic deficit. So now let's talk about the partial pressure of gases. Hopefully this is a basic review for most people, but I always need to understand things at a granular level as we talk through it to make it simple to understand. At sea level, total partial pressure of gas is 760 millimeters of mercury. Mostly nitrogen for all of us that are breathing in this room here, depending on how late you were at Bourbon Street last night, could be a little higher, a little lower. And 21% oxygen and some trace gases. So when you map that out, most of the partial pressure of gas is taken up by nitrogen in our body, and it doesn't really do anything to benefit us. It doesn't do anything to hurt us. It just takes up a lot of space. And so these are under, kind of normal conditions, right? So this slide kind of just gives you a little graphic representation. You can look at the blue as your lungs, and then the yellow is your venous blood, and then the red's the arterial blood. And so basically gas just moves from a high concentration to low concentration. PO2 increases, CO2 decreases, but because there's nitrogen in your blood and we're breathing nitrogen in, there's no nitrogen gradient, and nitrogen just kind of hangs around and doesn't move anywhere under normal conditions. And so when we think about normal baric oxygenation, so once you start blending anything less than 100%, you're starting to add nitrogen to dilute the oxygen down, in your system. So in this case, we can start to think about it as an extracorporeal system. So now the blue side can be your polymethylpentene or polypropylene straws, and the red side, would be the blood. And so in this case, we're using 50% oxygen. Let's say there's a gradient, there's 380 millimeters of mercury of nitrogen, in the venous blood, and it ends up being the same on the arterial side, giving you a total partial pressure of gases that's close to 760 or a full bar of atmosphere. And so when people start to say, well, how can we lower that? How can we decrease the total partial pressure of gases in the blood? And so Gibson and his group did some research, and in order to be able to produce it on the bench and study it and do some things, they added vacuum to the exhaust of the oxygenator in order to create a hypobaric state. And so in his case, he was able to, lower the total partial pressure of gases to about a half a bar of atmosphere. But obviously that might be challenging in a reproducible environment in, a cardiopulmonary bypass or ECMO. How are you going to produce a very safe structure when you're taking care of patients applying exhaust to the oxygenator? So there's concerns about maybe it's not practical to, use worldwide. But in the information that he found, looking pre-oxy under atmospheric conditions, moving through the ear circuit, post-oxygenator, post-filter, and at the patient, you can see in the top row that there's still a lot of GME that can get to the patient when you're actually, looking for it using EDAC studies and, trying to see how much air is potentially getting through microemboli, right? So we're using sensitive instruments to detect it. But if you can create a hypobaric state with a threshold of about a half a bar or less, a lot of that GME can reabsorb, and it reabsorbs as you're going not only through your circuit, but also can continue to reabsorb as you get into the patient, because you basically denitrogenate the patient's blood, and the patient's own blood becomes hypobaric. And so you can mitigate GME in doing that. And the advantages of doing that, when you look at atmospheric conditions on a controlled slide, the dilated capillaries in the periventricular white matter, you can see a lot of those white circles in the slide on your left. Oh, yeah, so they're not catching up. I'm moving quicker than the slides. Where is that one? That one's way, yeah, so we went too forward, Daniel.
We're looking for dilated capillaries. There you go, right there.
I just moved.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's fine. So you saw the vacuum slide, and now I'm on the graphic slide. Could you see the graphs when I had the graphs up there?
No.
For atmospheric and hypobaric with the lower number? I'm just hitting next, so. Oh. Okay, yeah, there. All right, I'm good now. Everybody with me up to this slide?
Yep.
All right, cool. So again, the white circles, those are the gaseous microemboli, mostly made up of nitrogen, clogging up the capillaries inside the brain. Okay, and then you can create a hypobaric condition in the blood. And it has, they said that one of the thresholds, we had a talk earlier about thresholds, the threshold to optimize that was about a half a bar or less, right? You just got the most amount of benefit of mitigating GME. You can see a lot of those round circles or those gaseous microemboli have been reabsorbed and have been eliminated. And so now we'll take it back to, a concept to say, okay, well, it doesn't seem practical to do, negative suction to the exhaust of an oxygenator. We said, well, how can we, mitigate the post-oxygenator PaO2 and eliminate GME and have do you give you the ability to control it? And so the way we chose to do that was by creating a VQ mismatch in the oxygenator. Yeah. Keep going. You have it on two computers, but the version is different on the one.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, so that's the one, but then this one changed and I didn't change it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I told you I wanted my computer. I would have better control. We all change our slides up to the last second. I mean, come on, we know we always trying to, pinch and everything. So, we'll note that for next year. Need a little more flexibility. But so anyway, we give you the capability to use 100% oxygen all the time, never blending in any nitrogen, but by creating a controlled VQ mismatch in the oxygenator, you're able to not have any nitrogen in your sweet gas. And after you go on and you do a couple, cardiac output cycles, you create a nitrogen gradient. So that there's nitrogen in the patient's blood, there's none in the sweet gas. The nitrogen gets exhausted just like the CO2 does. And you can basically get it down to nothing to where there's no nitrogen circulating in the patient by doing this. All right, so that's the goal. Using 100% oxygen all the time, no nitrogen, denitrogenate the patient's blood by a diffusion gradient, a nitrogen gradient to create the hypobaric state. All right, now we seem like we're caught up. So the way that we do this is we have a two-chambered oxygenator, right? It's polymethylpentene, polypropylene, just different fibers that both work in the same way. We have two gas chambers. So we separate the gas chambers so you can selectively ventilate portions of the polymethylpentene. So all the blood goes through all the polymethylpentene, but we're selectively ventilating the second half of the polymethylpentene or polypropylene to titrate the post-oxygenator PO2 and PCO2. And so this is kind of a graphic representation of that, where you can see you have two sweet gases. The black line in the middle of the red is kind of like the separation between the two different sections of the polymethylpentene. But from going left to right, you can see that we have a primary gas chamber. That's where most of the gas exchanges take place. And then the second gas chamber is really just where we titrate the post-oxygenator PO2 and saturation to your goal. Again, with the goal of trying to be less than a half a bar of atmosphere. We have a way with our ventilation module combined with the oxygenator where you can just set your post-oxygenator saturation and PO2 goals, and it knows how much to selectively ventilate each chamber to achieve those goals. And looking at our oxygenator and just doing some regular atmospheric studies in design, we have a centrifugal design through our oxygenator. We kind of put it in a horizontal fashion, a little bit non-traditional design. Just the physical design alone helps mitigate bubbles. So some of this information, looking at number of bubbles, our oxygenators in the blue, Inspire's in the orange, and the MG's in the gray. We injected 5, 10, and 30 mLs of air into the oxygenators. And then just looked at the number of bubbles that produced and also the volume of those bubbles. And so there was just some physical characteristics of the design that went in to mitigate bubbles even without creating a hypobaric state. And then we just also, try to continue to improve on that with that. And you see the same thing here. This is our small adult BT160. Similar results, just comparing against an Inspire. These under atmospheric conditions, just basic injection of air and looking at the amount of air and the amount of bubbles that kind of gets through the oxygenator. When you create a hypobaric state, so to the left of the dotted line, you can see the blue line is immediately post-oxy, so injecting air and then measuring immediately after that. And then 9 feet post-oxy is in the red. So in the hypobaric state, you can see the little blip, but then the longer it stays in the tubing, those gaseous microemboli can reabsorb. And under atmospheric conditions, that gas is going to hang around for a while. And so now when we create the hypobaric state, we're looking at the total volume of air post-oxy. So on the left side, I'm again injecting 10 mLs of air. Blue is immediate post-oxy and orange is 9 feet post-oxy. And then you can see under atmospheric conditions, you're comparing the gray is post-oxy and yellow is 9 feet post-oxy, right? So blue's hypobaric immediate post-oxy, orange is 9 feet post-oxy hypobaric, gray is post-oxy atmospheric, and yellow is 9 feet post-oxy atmospheric. So again, just trying to reinforce the idea that this concept can truly mitigate gaseous microemboli and the amount of bubbles and the size of the bubbles that are occurring. And so overall, based on the studies that we did, we're able to see a reduction of 425% post-oxygenator and about over 11,000% 9 feet post-oxygenator hypobaric. And that's just looking at the circuit, that we're not measuring the capability inside the patient to see the continued effects of circulating denitrogenated blood in the patient, which can continue to lower and mitigate the GME, giving it room to reabsorb. And so one of the things, as we're doing some studies now and we're testing, we're looking to maintain that post-oxygenator PO2 of about 100, 150. All right, I know that's not the culture, not the normal culture or the norm right now. And that's a little bit on purpose, because if you really think about it, we always tend to over-oxygenate. Some of that is scientific, some of that is comfort zone, some of that is a bias, as Mike was talking about earlier, maybe just, historically how we learned or feeling like we need a buffer. There's a lot of information coming out about the risks of hyperoxia and the benefits of normal baric oxygenation. So that's really where we're trying to go with this. And so if your goal was 250 and now it's 100 or 150, you would only have to increase your DO2I goals to 1 to 4% to negate that difference. And if you were using it as a buffer, just in case something happened that you felt like you had some extra oxygenation to buy you time, hypothetically speaking, it's only going to change that by, a very small fraction of a time. So I don't think it gives us the buffer we think it does in preparation for, something not to go so well. So I think the video puts it together nicely. It'll play. I don't know if you have the volume, Daniel. If not, I can voice over.
These denitrogenate the blood to minimize and eliminate gaseous microemboli in the arterial line. Air is introduced into blood by suckers, vents, the open chambers of the heart, temperature changes, the air-blood interface in an open reservoir, and syringes and IV lines are obvious sources of air introduction. The inflammatory and coagulation systems are activated by gaseous microemboli, or GME. Endothelial and microcirculation dysfunctions are widely recognized to be associated with GME. Higher GME counts are associated with increased neurological dysfunction, delirium, AKI, and other morbidities that lead to increased length of stay and all have a significant financial impact. GME can create ischemia by physically impeding blood flow, as well as stimulating the inflammatory characteristics that interfere with blood flow and metabolism. The sum of the pressures of each dissolved gas may equal up to 760 millimeters of mercury. Any higher in dissolved gas pressures will result in gas bubbles. Gas moves due to pressure gradients. Air bubbles contain about 78% nitrogen, exerting about 592 millimeters of mercury pressure. Responding to pressure gradients, gases move from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. In a typical arterial blood gas, gas pressures are PaCO2, 40 millimeters of mercury, PaO2, 200 millimeters of mercury, and the remaining composition of gas is mostly nitrogen, exerting about 450 to 500 millimeters of mercury pressure. By decreasing the total pressure of the dissolved nitrogen, we make room to dissolve additional nitrogen into the blood. Removing nitrogen from the blood creates a large pressure gradient, so the nitrogen in a bubble dissolves into the blood.
I'm not going to play it again. But I stole this from Jimmy Beck. He says you get better scores on your presentations when you get pictures of your family, and even more when you get pictures of your pets. So I figured I would throw that in there. And these are the references. For the full video, I posted it on LinkedIn. You can also check it out on Spectrum Medical if you need that visual to help digest it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Fantastic presentation. Thanks, Mark. We'll do questions at the end. So I invite our second speaker, Renee Dickey. Renee is currently a staff perfusionist at Eisenhower Medical Center, working on a team of 3. She's also the current treasurer of AMSECT and a member of the EMR Consensus Committee. Thank you.
Just going to wait for my slides to come up, but I have no disclosures. I'd like to thank Donnie and Molly and Dave for not making me the last speaker of the day. That honor goes to Luke. There we go.
Oop.
Oh gosh, I did a bad thing. There we go. Here's what we're going to talk about today. What is consensus versus evidence? We had a very good lecture on that, so it'll be very short. Why a consensus statement on EMRs versus a clinical practice guideline. How do you make a consensus statement? What's the process? I thought it was just getting together and drinking over beers and chatting. How do you make what are all the elements of an EMR? There's more than I thought. And what the consensus group thought an EMR should have. I'm so excited to have a poll. And so who in the room currently has an EMR? I already voted. Really looking forward to the results. Can you vote? Come on, get your phone out. Shauna, it's over there. Disappointing. Look at that. That's the red is yes, and I can't read the results. Can somebody tell me what it says? 53.7 and 19. And how many, can I get a show of hands of how many in here are pediatric versus adults? You have to raise your hand really high because it's very bright up here. Okay.
You want pediatrics?
Yeah, peds, raise your hands. Thank you. Oh, there she is. Good. So what is evidence? Shauna and Mel gave a great lecture on evidence, but what I'd like to say about it is that what we're looking for is consistency of findings. Sorry, can you forward? Thank you. Consistency of findings across research. And I love that Rob Baker touched on that today because you want something that's reproducible and so you can use it and trust the source. Let's see. And Shauna and Mel did give us a lot of information about evidence research yesterday, but I want to focus on consensus because it's quite different. Lesson 1, just because there's a group of smart people with a lot of knowledge, it doesn't mean there's consensus. It's a process. I learned that through this journey. In science, consensus represents the collective judgment, position, and opinion of the scientific community on a particular topic based on available evidence from research. Statements of expert consensus are based on best evidence using an explicit iterative process, observational studies, and expert consensus, always using the higher levels of evidence. A group of experts has to go through the process of finding group consensus. Since Luke is going to talk about ChatGPT, I thought I'd ask ChatGPT its thoughts on a consensus statement. It was so close to what Corey Allward wrote in our preamble. I'm going to start calling him Corey Chat. The reason a group of AMSEC perfusionists are working on consensus statement is because there isn't enough evidence-based research to create an evidence-based clinical guideline on EMR's use during bypass. So we need to come together and synthesize all that knowledge, take all that brain work that we collectively have and be able to suggest some best practices to help direct the future. According to Lowbush, I think I'm saying that right, and friends, in the 2020 Adult Clinical Perfusion Practice Survey, 40% of perfusionists in adult practices do not use an EMR. So today what we had 19, how many percent on the slide? for my poll. It was like 19-20% only. That's pretty good. That's an improvement. And as Don Nieder said, a good paper chart is better than a bad EMR. And that was really interesting, but fortunately there's so many good EMRs now, so there's really no excuse to not have one. The thought is maybe AMSEC should identify the gaps and challenges in adoption of an EMR to help promote greater adoption, so we get to 100%. The goal isn't just to get to people to adopt that EMR, it's to create consistency across the platforms and users by setting standards and guidelines, and by providing evidence-based recommendations and expert consensus. Perfusionists can use that information to base their decisions and actions and to help support them with their directors so they can get the best possible EMR. In a situation where there's a lack of evidence, a consensus statement can help create tools for quality improvement initiatives that are enabled by the use of EMRs, and consensus papers can have a significant impact on policymaking, decision-making, and clinical practices. As this has been the theme of this meeting, a consensus statement promotes collaboration and networking. Collaborating on a consensus paper brings together experts from diverse backgrounds and disciplines and institutions. If working with this group that I've been allowed to work with is part of my professional development, then I'm one of the luckiest perfusionists in AMSEC. A consensus statement can also encourage participation in local and national registries, data registries, which can lead to improved outcomes and safety for patients, which is what we're all working for. So we had a conference planning committee during COVID, and I was on a conference planning call with Luke and Dave Fitzgerald. Dave brought up the idea it's time for AMSEC to have a consensus statement on EMRs. So Luke and I were like, yeah, I want to volunteer, right? Yeah, you were there. I saw you. Of course, I didn't have any idea what that really involved. And I just thought it sounded like a good way to hang out with Luke and Dave. I really did not have any idea even where to start this process. And thank goodness there's so many online resources. This clinical consensus statement manual by Rosenfeld and friends became the framework of our process. There's really explicit directions on how to achieve the goal of a consensus statement. And it was very different than I thought. And it's been such a process of learning. So who are we going to call? We started, I really wish I were good at editing, because that would be Dave, Luke, and I'd be in the back with the good hair. We started with a call, and we had to identify a chair, assistant chairs, and methodologists to serve on the clinical consensus statement. Right there, when you say methodologist, I get scared. Not sure how I became the chair. I've learned never raise your hand around Dave. Next thing you know, you're the chair. It's all part of the professional development program at AMSEC. We did not follow the OTO group, especially they expected you to finish your clinical consensus statement in 8 months. We did, and there also you had to attend every call. And we had a member of the group that was pregnant, and she was like, I can't make every call. I'm like, we'll give you a pass. It's okay. We invited perfusionists from the US, England, Belgium, and Australia that are basically over the top about EMRs, data, and most of all, over the top about raising their hands, like Shauna and Luke. We also agreed we had to bring along some people who are newer to the profession, who are more adept with computers and coding. 2 of the younger perfusionists we invited along were Brian McCann and Jessica Dixon, and they know how to code. They know how to handle a computer better than I will ever know how to handle one. We had a planning call with a group of experts who were also enthusiastic to join. It was very nice. Here's our group of experts. I'm humbled to be the chair of the statement writing group. Thanks, Dave. These guys are experts in every way. And of course, you might think I'm remiss because I didn't put everyone's credentials up there, but it would have taken 2 more slides and you guys would have gotten the hook out and pulled me off the stage. So I had to skip that part. Sorry. One of the crazy things about my journey right now is I worked with these great perfusionists out here, Amy and Brian Perfett. And I've had an electronic medical record for 27 years. We had a homegrown electronic medical record. It was great. A guy on our team made it. You had to type in the stats as you went along in the case. Wasn't very easy without N+1. And we got N+1. And then we got the DMS from LivaNova, and then we got the Connect. And these guys have moved on to Epic. And I now have a paper chart. And I mean, if you take out your pencil right now, pretend to take out your pencil, go ahead, write the word neosynephrine. Everybody do it. Get your hand up. I don't see you over there. Are you guys doing it? It takes me 6 seconds to write neosynephrine. And I just laugh. I'm like, that's what my partners do. They write the whole word out. They don't write neo, they write neosynephrine. So this has been such a great journey because we will be getting a EMR shortly. Thank goodness. Thanks in part to this paper. So let's see what we got up there. What's Delphi method? Using the OTO consensus statement manual, Dave had us trying to define PICO questions. And we talked about PICO questions a little bit yesterday. And I'm sure that was quite entertaining for Dave because I don't think we ever came up with a really great PICO question about this. But then he used the awesome power of the library and it did a stage 1 literature search looking for guidelines and systematic reviews. We had a conference call to define the scope of the consensus statement. We developed and ranked topic list questions and corresponding draft consensus statements. We conducted a stage 2 literature search. Most of the good literature was from perfusionists, and I could name all their names. They're mostly in the group. We assigned everybody 7 papers to read in groups of 2 to come back to us about how that literature supported the process. They had to read 7 papers. It was really good. We created a Delphi survey, which for the purpose of the project was a list of elements of an EMR that a group thought should be required put into question format in SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey has a 9-point Likert scale survey that does all the math to find the averages of all the rankings. I was so thankful. I thought I was going to have to do all this math on my own. I know it's only 1 to 9 and I can add that much, but and then divide and do it for every question. And there were so many questions. And when we all took the survey and the answers showed up, I was like, oh, thank God. The group of members were then given writing assignments. And I skipped a bit there. We had a call to discuss the results of the survey. We did a second survey, and then we had to give out writing assignments. And that's a scary thing to give out writing assignments because if you give Jimmy Beck the wrong writing assignment, you're going to hear back from him. And Jim Rieger might not like his writing assignment, but Jessica Dixon, Carmen Giacomuzzi, and Laura Delaria were so helpful in helping me designate who writes what. The writing assignments were submitted to me for consolidation on Google Drive. And then a number of members looked over the paper, and then George Justison spent months turning this in all these 17 writers into one voice. So that was so much work, and I so thank him. I think I have another poll here. It's not going to work out right, but we're going to do it anyway. So a Delphi survey, I just want you guys to have a sample of what a Delphi survey would be like, but we didn't put it in a Likert scale, but if you could just answer the questions. I can't read what it says up there. So do you want your EMR to connect to the pump? Obviously, right? So that would be hopefully everybody, it's a 9 on the Likert scale, or everybody says yes. And then should an EMR connect to the anesthesia machine? Does it need to? Should it? We did pretty good on that consensus, but here this last sentence is, can the EMR auto-populate registries? Well, here's what our results looked like. I can't even read that slide from here. And can you forward? Perfect, thank you. So obviously to a pump, we got good consensus on that. We were very excited about that. To the anesthesia machine, good consensus. Can auto-populate registries? First of all, I think we kind of pansied out by saying can instead of should. And we were ready to accept that we were going to write that into the paper, can auto-populate registries. And Rob Baker sends out an email to me and says, we need to revisit that. I think we need a little more debate. And we're still debating it. And there is not consensus. So it's been a really interesting process just on that one statement. So here are the 16 basic elements the group thought should be part of an EMR. It's an extensive list, and every single element is important. And I'm not going to read them off to you, but Jim Rieger, who's not in the room, so I can't make his head get big or anything. He came up with this great idea of putting the elements into different categories. The selection, acquisition, and installation. So what you're going to look at before you buy an EMR, what's important in selecting it? How's it going to work in your institution? Perioperative, what's important when you're using an EMR during the procedure? How does it run? How does it work? How does it flow? And then post-procedure, what's important in using an EMR post-procedure? So what's important in purchasing, selecting, and installing an EMR in your institution? Well, system acquisition and installation. Is the EMR supported by the vendor for setup and maintenance? Does it provide a roadmap for installation, training, and such? Does the vendor offer 24/7 support? There's nothing like a late night computer problem with no support to increase your stress. I would say my partners, Amy and Brian, know, like when the computer went down, they all would look at me. It's like, can you fix it? And the stress level, my blood pressure probably actually goes up. Is there support from the vendor for training the hospital IT team for easier troubleshooting 24/7 so you don't have to call them maybe? And does a vendor define what's adequate training for new users? In 2024, any EMR should go through your IT approval and integration. Connectivity, does it connect to your pump, your anesthesia monitor, all or most of the patient monitors? Do we really need that? Is it just clogging up space on the EMR? Can you get it off somebody else's record? Does it upload lab values automatically? Can it auto-populate registries? And I talked about that, and I hope we come up with a consensus on that. I think it should. I think it would be easier for all of us. Does it link to guidelines and protocols? So like when you're on bypass, can you look up a protocol to see if you need to make changes? Is it customizable? Can you customize the EMR to a degree, but make sure it's still a valid set of data? Does the EMR collect the data at a rate that you want it collecting? Can the team make changes to the basic setup? You don't want to have, it should be protected by administrator mode. So you don't come in, you work on a Monday, you're not working till Wednesday, and you come in and everything's changed because somebody decided to change up everything, switch up a few things, and you're like, don't know where anything is on your record. Let's see. Security. Is it secure for, is it HIPAA compliant? HIPAA compliant for your nation where you live? Supply and equipment. We had all of these items under supply and equipment, and we had no consensus on any of them, except that you should be able to track down your equipment after the case. And weight and size. Is it too heavy for your pump? Will it topple it over? Is it easy to change out when it fails? Are you going to pinch your fingers on something? Are you going to have problems? And then Kathy Spitzer said, you want to be able to change it out because it's quite inferior to have to go from using an electronic medical record during a case and then have to go back to a piece of paper halfway through. It's just not acceptable. So it needs to be, you need to be able to change it out. And last, presentation of information. Is it large enough to see? Is it in the natural order of the case? There's good resolution. I'll go back to, is it large enough to see? Because some of us are wearing, as Donnie calls them, bifocals. It's okay. Graduated lenses. Is it effective information presentation? Workflows customizable, alerts and alarms notifications are customizable, and you can switch between numerical and graphic data. All of the elements here in blue, we've already just talked about because they were in the first category, and now these are in the first and second category if they're in blue. Remote viewing, can you have N+1? So you can have somebody watching, your boss can be watching from the office. But the thing that we agreed upon is the boss should not be Big Brother. The boss should be there to help you and come. He can see, he gets an alarm, he sees I should come check on you guys. Something's going wrong. Cognitive load, presentation of information again. Is it easy to use and it doesn't distract you? The original computer we had where we had to type everything in was probably the biggest distraction I've ever had as a perfusionist. It creates a legible record. No one can read my writing. It's terrible. 6 seconds to write me a stuff. It's embarrassing. The EMR is efficient, it minimizes steps for interaction, does not require memorization after initial training, and it uses standard clinical profiles. And the group only reached near consensus on preset buttons for emergent bypass. We didn't really want people to just push buttons on their checklist to get on bypass. And I know some pumps do actually force you to do that, but we didn't think it was necessarily the best thing to do. And then how does it hook up to your pump? Does it hook up through LAN to USB, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, RS-232, like an actual cable, cellular? We had no consensus on Bluetooth and cellular. Bluetooth and cellular just fail too often in an OR. And for the perfusion record, can you upload a minimum data set as defined by your institution? Does it automatically load up to the EHR in a data format, or do you still have to just load it up as a PDF? And data storage and backup, can you store it on the EMR, or do you have to store it in the cloud, and is it safe? And what's important in using an EMR post-bypass? Quality. Does the EMR automatically create an easily customizable individual team quality report? And is there a need for reliable quality data that's easy to find? And reporting elements. Is there ability to extract and format data in a usable way? Richard Issett, who's in our group, pointed out that EMR should have non-proprietary data analytics software language, so users can set up data analytics without difficulty. And you want to be able to see your trends, make practice changes, and then track those changes. And is the checklist incorporated into the record? Is it time-stamped? And is there an SBAR for user changes? And we did not agree on having it for starting bypass, which I said earlier. So there it is. That's everything we thought you should have in an EMR. We've consolidated the paper. We've added all the references, which was difficult. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Renee. Next is we've got Luke Puis. I don't know if you've noticed, Luke's been walking around with the retired ribbon on his badge, but he's been but the retirement exhausted him, so he's crossed the and now he's just tired. Luke is a clinical perfusionist in Belgium, board certified for 20 years. Luke is in the MSEC committee, reviewer for different journals, has co-authored the 2019 European guidelines for cardiopulmonary bypass, and is the editor of the Tiny Perfusion Letter.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction. And thank you for the previous speakers. They were like excellent. It was a privilege to be in the consensus statement group. And when you look back at it now, it was really like a community, and everyone brought their ideas, and it was really great. I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me and to give my opinion. I always like to give my opinion. And they wanted me to answer the question, who's going to drive the pump in the future? And well, that's not an easy question. I'm going to purvey some ideas. This is really the last call, and thank you for staying. So I'm going to take it lightly, but I'm serious about it, really. This is my outline. We're going to talk about squirrels. We're going to talk about dictionaries, the Japanese metro station or train network, slime molds. We're going to talk about the 80s, or we're going to see some images from the 80s. This is self-explanatory. We're going to talk about capitalism, ultra-capitalism, cyber sickness, artificial intelligence that was asked as well, chatbots, and global warming. It's going to be really interesting. And most of all, we're going to talk about you. Because when you're going to say who's going to be driving the pump, well, that's easy. We've heard it throughout the conference. There's all these new technologies coming up. There's all this artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, but in the end, and look at that, that's 2003, and that should be two fingers pointing at you, but it didn't go through. So it's you. There's going to be a perfusionist behind the pump. But what is that, a perfusionist? You know, what constitutes all the elements of a perfusionist? If we look at the dictionary, and that's my first element, the dictionary, it's a certified and an educated person. You know, you have to go to school, you have to follow an education after you show that you understood what you've been taught. You know, that's also something, and that's also what AMSEC thinks of a perfusionist. This is the scope of practice definition of a perfusionist, and I will enlarge it a little bit and highlight it. It's a credentialed professional. They are educated, and they have shown that they understand what they do, and they have clinical and experience and competency. So it's a lot of education, you know, but in real life, it's more than your education. It's what you know, how you are trained, your own intelligence. It's also we talked about non-technical skills this week, your personality that also constitutes of a perfusionist, how you say things, how you bring over your ideas. Experience is very important. It will bring you from when you have a bad venous return and you say to your surgeon, I have bad venous return, your surgeon will think, well, that sounds like a you problem. After a while, you could say, when you have more experience, you could say, doctor, your mortality is going up right at this moment. And then he will listen to you, of course. So that's what I call experience. And it's a non-technical skill. It's also about your team and your colleagues. They will define what kind of perfusionists you want to be or can be. It's a culture in your institution, your local environment, and I mean the surgeons, anesthesiologists, but also the people who clean the rooms. You have to show respect for them, and they will show respect for you. And all these elements, and I'm probably forgetting a few, they turn out to be what is a perfusionist. And so how can AI fit into that spectrum of elements that define a perfusionist? And in my search for answers, I came upon this website that makes images from AI. And I was very curious, and I said, okay, I typed in cardiovascular perfusionist, and I could do an anime version or there was a lot of possibilities to choose the kind of picture, but I said, let's have some fun and do an 80s photo. And okay, hold on. This was the answer from the AI. And yeah, there's a lot going on there. I mean, the shoes, really. And then, it's the costume. The machines are also very interesting. There's a lot going on with the stethoscopes. They're very futuristic in the 80s. I think the only thing that's really, really accurate is the cup of coffee he's holding and, nice smile. And then I said, I put in a name and I'm not going to identify the person, but I said, maybe I should put in a name. And then it will give me a better picture, and it gave me the picture on the right. So I'm not going to tell you who I put in there because we might have some problems with something. But yeah, it was interesting. So I said, well, let's put in someone serious, let's put in David Fitzgerald, and still 80s photo. And please hold on, this is going to be I don't know why, but this was the result. So sorry, David, is he still in the room? Oh, no. Well, I'll send it to him. I could have said Kevin Bacon, but I don't know. I don't know how the training works of this machine. Anyway, so I could talk about a lot where AI can be involved, but I'm going to focus on the education, knowledge, training, intelligence. How are we trained, and how can AI and the new technologies help us? And simulation is a big thing. We can all agree that simulation in perfusion it has to be there. It's proven that simulating and training events can help you in mitigate those events when they happen. Okay, there's actually a Society for Simulation in Healthcare, and they are writing guidelines now. They have a methodology that I've never seen before, but that's not the the biggest thing. So they have some guidelines on how you should do simulation and how you can use the virtual reality, the augmented reality, they call it collectively XR, and should you use it? And sorry for the fine print, but there's very low levels of evidence. And from this conference, we heard that there's some stuff coming up. There's a lot of companies starting to bring it to us. And it would potentially cost lower because all you need is the device and the software. You don't need a heart-lung machine. But cyber sickness is a real thing. So your perception of space and time goes completely out of range. There's a lot of bias present because it's actually the companies that do most of the research. There's not enough evidence, of course, for benefit in perfusion at this moment, and also how are you going to quantify this in like it's the question that I asked earlier this week. Then for certain procedures like surgery, there are some also simulation works, but does the virtual simulation work? Still very low levels of evidence, no info on the cost, still bias present. Half of the research is funded by the industry, still no evidence. So how are we going to do this? One thing that was really nice, and I'm just for info, if you're doing team stuff in the OR, it's best to do train team stuff in virtual reality or in simulation as a whole. So I just wanted to give that with you. So this is also an interesting article. So when I as an RT student, I use a lot of scenarios. I have to do a scenario exam. I have to do 22 scenarios and I have to pass 15 of them. And these researchers looked at, can AI, ChatGPT in this case, make good scenarios for us? And they did 2 scenarios, one on cardiac arrest and one on asthma. And it was overall a good performance. There was potential. It could be a tool for the future to use this. It was faster. It created even a new debriefing method. And it was able to create clinical vignettes. So meaning it showed a good clinical picture of a patient. But there were a lot of downsides. You have to fact check everything. And you have to keep on training it. Because, some medication isn't there, or you have to say, okay, but I'm on a patient who is 5-year-old, or on a patient who is 7-year-old. So you have to explicitly say everything. And by the time you do that, you might as well written the scenario yourself. They don't use existing guidelines or existing algorithms that are evidence-based because probably they don't have access to it because it's behind a paywall or it's a non-open access journal. So, and also who trains these models to tell us what to do. And also there's something like ChatGPT, when you ask it questions, it starts hallucinating or confabulating. So it makes stuff up. It makes up references. It makes up dosages. So I think that's a real problem. And like I said, there's certain resources that it cannot get to. But I think that's a really bad problem. And so there's now, I was going to try it out because I said, well, let's do this, let's talk to a ChatGPT bot that is specifically made for perfusion. It gives you a lot of promises. It says it's designed to provide expert knowledge and support. And it's a website. You have to give your name, you have to give your phone number. I didn't do that, but it asks for your email address, and then it gives you a handout of what you talked about. And so I typed in the question also, and so it gives you a lot of promises. It says it's accurate and yada yada yada, but then it says please be advised it's just a tryout, so you have to check everything that we say. So they cover themselves, which is a good thing, and I like the warning there. I didn't put it in bold. Okay, so I start talking, and I put on my serious face, a nice picture, and I start talking. And this is how people think that I actually type. It's very slow, you know, like that's how my wife thinks I type. But this is the question that I typed in, and then you get these three little dots that start, you know, and it's like talking to your wife, like, do you need the blue or the green? I need to know it now because the line is going. And or it's like talking to your kid, and after 4 days they respond to you. But anyway, it starts giving you an answer. It's faster than this, but I just wanted to show you something. So here's some things you can ask. And the first thing is talk to an agent. I'm like, that's some really service support one-on-one. Normally that's the last thing that you can choose. But anyway, it gives you some options. So I still didn't get an answer to my question, so I repeated the question, but I did copy paste now. I get smarter. And it starts prompting an answer. And then it comes and it starts explaining stuff to you, and it talks a lot. So I think ChatGPT is male, because there's a lot of mansplaining going on there. You know, you're like, okay, I just asked you blue or green, and then you get a whole prompt. And this was the on plurals shed blood. What do you do with it? And basically, it gave me good options. You know, it was really like, I was a little bit taken aback and like, this is not bad. This is what I would think about it. But also that's the problem with ChatGPT, and I will explain later. It talks in a way that it appeases you. It gives you, oh, you're on the right track. You know, like it makes you feel comfortable, and which made me feel uncomfortable. So I typed again, and I literally typed this. That's a mistake that I often make in an email. So I was a little bit taken aback, and it was like, yeah, sure, you're welcome. And then I said, okay, I need to get out of here. It felt uncomfortable. So I went back the next day and I said, okay, I'm going to ask a simple question and I just need a simple answer. I'll go faster for your sake. And again, I just asked, what cannula should I use? What size should I use? I should have asked what size, but I just asked what can. And it explains me a lot, and it says the articles say that you should do this and you should take into account the weight, and I know all these things, and it even tells me, well, maybe you should call Elso and ask it, and I know that, you know. And also it just stopped in the middle of a sentence. And I said, well, okay, thank you. I was still a little bit uncomfortable with it. And it said, it looks like you're expressing gratitude. It's a very strange to talk to this chatbot, you know. But anyway, you know, I was a little bit more prepared, and I said, I'm going to ask the question, you know, I have this presentation I have to give. So who will be driving the pump in the future? And the answer was a whole explanation about the difference between roller pumps and centrifugal pumps. So not quite yet there. Also, again, it stopped in the middle of the question. And I said, can you give me the references of where you got this information? And it talked again and it talked again. It gave me some references, some direction of what reference it could be, but not quite there yet. Then I said, maybe I should train it and ask my question in a different way. And I said, who will be responsible for operating the heart-lung machine in cardiac surgery? And again, a very long answer. And it pleased me again, because it said, well, it will be a perfusionist, because the perfusionist is too important to not do it. And there's going to be new technology that will help us make decisions. Okay. And then I said, apologies, but your last answer got cut off. And it just gives you the rest of the answer. So just a tip, when you're like, I don't have anything, just say like, hey, can you keep on talking? Okay. And, you know, it was a very strange experience. I think it's, again, promising tool for the future. There's a lot of potential. but there's also legal and ethical considerations. If it doesn't give me an answer, then who's responsible, or it gives me a wrong answer, who is responsible for it? You know, it's basically malpractice if I would use ChatGPT and say, well, they told me to do it because it said it was going to give me expert opinion and care. So we have to be careful with that. So even the World Health Organization calls for safe and ethical AI, and you have to be careful because it will give you inaccurate information, and it will give it to you in a way that it is accurate. It cannot, and again, once again, all the things that I said before, be careful with what it says, and it needs more training potential, blah, blah, blah. I was going to get really philosophical at this point. What is intelligence? There's many levels of intelligence. For example, squirrels, they hide around 10,000 nuts a year every year, and they find back 50 to 75%. I think that is intelligence, you know, like I can even find my keys in the morning, and they have been around for 30 million years, you know. Then, for example, the black ant you see has about 20 million cells in its body, and the thing it's on top is one cell. It's called a slime mold. It is a one-cellular organism. It has multiple nuclei that can talk to each other. It can move. It remembers where it's been because it leaves little biomarkers, and it follows food, and it goes around obstacles, all in one cell. And it grows up to 3 feet. This is what it looks like. It just pulses its way through life and looking for food. And what some researchers in Japan did, they made a map. So this is the railway of Japan, the greater Tokyo area. They made a map for the slime molds with color difference because slime molds don't like light. And they put food, and they just let the slime molds grow. And the one in green is the slime mold, and the one in red is the existing railroad network. And it made an as efficient network with one cell only. So that's also, I think, intelligence. And then I was going on a a ramp against ultra-capitalism, and to come to some conclusions that humans have been around for only 200,000 years. And I've did a great job of screwing up everything, and basically it's very unhealthy to live in a country like the United States where there's a lot of inequality. But I'm just gonna come to a kind of conclusion. What traits of human intelligence do we then actually want to put in artificial intelligence? You know, we're very good at destroying ourselves, so maybe we should be careful what we do. And this is a picture of the 7 Deadly Sins by Hieronymus Bosch, famous Dutch painter in the 1600s. And I think we managed to put artificial intelligence in the 7 Deadly Sins already. So I think we should step away from that, from all these things that we have already done, and maybe focus more on the patient. And what exactly do we need to do with a patient? What kind of thing do we need to take care of? And so in 2001, they already gave the answer. Care should be safe, effective, patient-centered, timely, efficient, and equitable. Those are the things that we should look for, or that when we are going to apply artificial intelligence into perfusion. And how to do that, I'm not going to go into deeper detail, but this would be a very good start. This was just published in, so the New England Journal of Medicine now has an AI section. And this article explains really good how we should do that. So I'm going to keep this reference in the presentation. So once again, who's going to drive the pump? It will still be a perfusionist with AI, with use in different domains I'm almost done. In different domains of our composition of what a perfusionist is. But as I say, it has potential, it's promising, it will be the future, but those are really buzzwords. We have to really take ownership of this. And so to conclude, we know it's there now. We know how to do it, but we must also apply this. And it's, sorry, my screen just blacked out.
I think we-
So willing is not enough. No. Willing is not enough. We must also do. Okay, squirrels. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent presentation and the humor. Do we have any questions from the audience? Go ahead, Don. While you're doing that, I can actually ask a real quick one. Mark, we have an online question for you. And the question was, are you guys doing research on nitrogen reperfusion injury?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. I was just curious as well when I saw that one. And actually, just for your reference, we have quite a few questions for you. So I'd love to share those with you later.
Yeah.
Because I know we won't get to all of them. Oh,
Renee-
look at this.
Renee, I just wanted to follow up and thank you for creating awareness about EMRs and hopefully advocacy among EMRs and perfusion, because I thought I needed to follow up. Yeah, a good paper record is better than a bad electronic medical record, but perfusionists don't want to use bad medical records. What I found when I audit those sites is they say, this isn't what we wanted, but we were never asked about this. This was just kind of thrust upon our department because, the whole hospital had to get this, I don't know, we'll just say, for example, Epic, just to throw out a word. We had to get, this isn't what we wanted. We would have preferred Viper or Spectrum or something like that. So it's not that perfusionists are actively pursuing bad medical EMRs. F201, they just say, we were never included in the process. So by creating awareness, maybe a perfusionist can understand what they want in EMRs. So thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Zach, you're up. Oh, sorry, Bob, I didn't see you.
Sorry, Zach
so
Lemon,
short.
Iowa City, student there. My question is for Mark. So, your data was fascinating and, at reducing GME with the hypobaric oxygenator. I wasn't around for bubble oxygenators to the membrane, but this does seem like, reducing the GME has huge potential and could be a shift across the board. Does Spectrum have like all of the patents for this, or could other manufacturers come into the space and develop a similar product?
We do have the patents, and when we applied for the patent, we also took the patents for other ways to achieve it. We chose to only develop one, but we own patents on more than one way to achieve the hypobaric oxygenation effect.
Awesome. Bob?
Thank you for a great session. This was very stimulating. You guys did a fantastic job, and I'm so glad I stayed till the end because this was some of the best content of the whole meeting. So thank you to all of you. I have a question for Mark. I'm blown away by this technology, this hypobaric technology. I still don't know how you maintain and adjust oxygenation with just oxygen and not the other gases. You showed really well how putting emboli into the circuit, it eliminates it after it goes through the lung. It occurred to me looking at emboli, some of the transcranial Doppler stuff I've done, these emboli in the body, they keep going through the circulation. We've seen emboli enter the middle cerebral artery and then go through the circulation and come back again when there's a lot of them. I'm wondering, you didn't talk about the potential of hypobaric oxygenation being able to be sort of like a vacuum cleaner to take the emboli out that come from the cardiac chambers. Could you comment on that? When the ones that the surgeons put in there.
Yeah, that's the most important part, right? So we know there's going to be ones at the end of your case, and I always, always something as a non-perfusionist, I was like asked those questions. The clamp comes off, the heart's beating, you're flowing at 5 liters a minute. There's a ton of air in the chest, and the vent's running at a half a liter a minute. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh man, like where's all that air go? And so the slides we show are what we were able to easily study, which is everything on the circuit. But all of the patient's blood is denitrogenated. And so what we tried to show is that the longer the GME is in a hypobaric state in the blood, the more they continue to reabsorb back into the fluid state. So the idea is the entire patient's blood, that bubble that you said went and came back again, that's not going to happen once you denitrogenate the patient's blood. And so I think, we need to give some more graphic representations of how there's a continued effect, because inside the patient's not getting nitrogen from anywhere. So as long as you can control everything, make sure they're not getting nitrogen through the ventilator to their lungs, and there's no nitrogen being applied to the gas, you can almost completely denitrogenate their blood.
Please.
Hi, my name is Usama from Canada. These were very interesting talks. It's definitely worth sticking around to the end. My question is regarding EMR. So in terms of increasing the recognition of perfusionists, not just in the country, but just in our hospitals, I find people don't really know who we are. So when you sign off your EMRs, in terms of just credentialing, do you have your credentials when you put yourself in as staff in Epic as CCP or whatever it might be for whatever country you're in? Like I know nurses and RTs, when they sign off on their charts, Epic and some EMRs automatically fill them in. So just for your electronic record, do you get your credentials once you put in your name on Epic or whatever it might be that you use? And this is kind of an open question for the audience. So when you sign off at your institution, are you recognized with your credentials as a perfusionist?
Want to answer that?
I have no credentials, so I don't have a problem.
When I put my signature in, my credentials do show up. Can I have a show of hands of everybody who has their credentials on their name on their perfusion record? Good thing to have. Yeah, I think it's important to have them there. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, so we are over time, and I know we have an enormous amount of questions online that we didn't get to, and I apologize. But again, please feel free to reach out to our speakers. Tammy, any last minute announcements before we head safely home?
Say thank you, and thank you for sticking out to the end. This is a phenomenal session. Thank you to the speakers and the moderators, and enjoy the rest of your time and safe home.
Great, great. So yeah, great. So that's, we wanted to let you know we're wearing the t-shirts, not only because we are super fun moderators, but to remind you that the t-shirts are still available. The t-shirts help support the students, and when they go home, they get to submit back to the student fund, and the money that you pay for your t-shirt goes to the students and it gets divided by the students. So it does help them get here and help them get this experience. So they are still available until Zach? Until the end of March. So even if you don't have one yet, they're super cool. We can show you the back of them. Yes, the students design them. They do everything. I tend to buy one from both of our professional societies every year just because I love the t-shirts, and you can wear them around and people never know what you're talking about. So it's awesome. So be sure to join us next year, AMSEC 2025. And we are so grateful that you are here. You all deserve a prize for sticking out. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you for moderating. It's wonderful to have you. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Do you want to take a peek? I mean, you can see it on the app.